All right. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here for this session. My name is Chris Sprowls. I have the pleasure of serving on the ExcelinEd Action Board. I also had the opportunity to serve 8 years in the Florida legislature, my last two as Speaker of the House. We've got a great panel for you today. As you all know, the title of today's panel is Keeping Up with AI, Smart Policies to Protect Students in a Digital Age. I think we all agree, whether you're here as a lawmaker, a state chief, or as a thought leader in education, all of us are faced with both huge opportunities in artificial intelligence, as well as this growing responsibility to protect our students and our classrooms from great risk. And we've got an amazing lineup of panelists for you this morning who can talk in great depth about that. I'll start from my left and go all the way to the end there to Matt. Directly to my left, we have Nate Hoffman, who leads the Florida team for Excel in Education, and also has the opportunity to work with many of you across the country on innovative education policy. We also have with us Robbie Torney from Common Sense Media, who's going to talk about the AI risk assessment that they've done at Common Sense and some great work they're doing to help protect students and families. Casey Mock to his left from Anxious Generation gets to work across the country and travel a great deal. Casey really working on technology protections for students. And last but certainly not least, Matt Winters from Utah. Matt is a artificial intelligence education specialist and is really going to give us great insight about how Utah's been at the front of these conversations and what they're doing to both maximize the impact of AI in the classroom and protect students. That's what we want you to get out of this panel today. The great opportunities that exist in AI and education, how we can move our students forward, but do it in a way that protects them and protects them from the great dangers that can come from great technological advancements. Y'all ready to go? All right, let's do it. This is for all panelists, and Nate, we can start off with you. Over the last year, AI has shifted from a buzzword used around to a daily reality, especially inside our classroom. What trends are you all seeing and how it's being used in education?
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker, for the question, and good morning, everybody. I think a couple years ago, when the last time we did an AI panel at the National Summit, this was right after ChatGPT had been released, and all of this stuff was coming into being for the at least to the general public for the first time. And I think the guidance that we were giving at that point was, well, we don't know a lot yet, and we certainly don't know what we don't know. So let's pull together. I think our guidance was, let's pull together some statewide task forces of experts who do know what they're talking about in this space, and start to answer, or at least identify, the questions that would need to be covered and addressed as it relates to AI and education. I think we're 2 years or so removed from that, and multiple iterations of GPT and other platforms that are out there. And in a lot of ways, generative AI and different AI, technologies are embedded in a lot of the ed tech platforms that are used in schools every single day. But I think what we're starting to see and hear from not only classroom educators, but also from the voter, just the general voting population, parents, students out there, as far as their interactions with AI, is that, number one, there's maybe too much technology in the classroom. Number two, the technology that is available, teachers don't have enough training on how to properly use. And so those are two things, are certainly trends that we're paying attention to, and think need to be addressed as we move forward.
Yeah, that's great. Please.
Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I think building off of what was just said, a couple things that we would highlight from our nationally representative polling are, first, that teens are using AI and teachers are too. A majority of kids and adults are using AI. This even goes into early childhood. For the early childhood folks in the room, our Common Sense census showed that 40% of kids ages 5 through 8 are using AI for learning in some way, shape, or form. But one use case that we've been really tracking is the use of AI for companionship, which is AI for relationships, for emotional support, and for mental health support. Our research shows that 3 in 4 teens in this country are using AI for companionship. 50% are regular users. AI companions can be standalone apps, but they can also be ChatGPT or Gemini or other multi-purpose models, and AI chatbots that our companions are in many platforms that teens are using every day. They're in Instagram, they're in Snapchat, they're in WhatsApp. They are all over the place. So this is a large scale mainstream use of AI, and it was adopted very, very quickly. We're only 3 years out from the GPT moment, and there's definitely risks associated with that we can share from our research. But the big headline I want you to hear is kids are using it. They're using it a lot, and they're using it not just for schoolwork. They're using it for emotional support and connection.
Yeah, it's helpful. Casey.
Thank you. And thanks y'all for being here. Just building on Robbie's point about the ubiquity of both the companions, but also like implicit in the question, right? That this has gone from buzzword to just being everywhere is a very concerted business strategy, right? The strategy that these companies are using is to make it feel like going back to the before times is unthinkable and impossible. And I think all of the folks in this room probably get a sense of this with earlier iterations of technology, things like Chromebooks, right? It's really hard to come up with a way to sort of unwind tablets and Chromebooks being in the classroom and focusing on something that's productive and pedagogically appropriate for students just because they were pushed out so fast, so hard. And so, rolling things back has become unthinkable. It's the same companies involved this time that were involved with pushing social media into kids' lives and running a massive uncontrolled experiment on young people that we have now 15 years of information, and that hasn't gone well. And so that same business strategy is at play today, and is something I would just really advise people keep their eyes on.
Great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us. So on the teacher's end, what we're starting to see, we ran a program over the last 6 months in the state of Utah where we trained up over 6,000 teachers with basic AI literacy. We aimed for 1,500. We way overshot, which is fantastic. But what we're seeing in those teachers is that they need more time to play with this technology to really understand how to implement it in their classrooms at various levels. But then also that they need to move past productivity into creativity to really understand what the appropriate ways to use it and also where they can leverage their expertise in new and unique ways. On the legislative kind of policy side, one of the things that we're asking as a state around the Office of AI Policy, which is a unique body here in the state of Utah, is around how can we support students when they leave our classrooms and our networks and our devices when they become consumers of these products, and how can we protect them in those instances as well? We know that best practices in the state of, or in any state around cybersecurity and technology are in our districts and our charter schools, but when they leave and they are on their own personal device, they become a consumer, and that can shift the game. And so how do we protect our students and our parents and our larger communities around these tools, especially when we talk about companion chatbots and kind of those problematic uses of AI, so that they're protected in the long term.
Yeah. Matt, coming from Utah, you've seen this play out firsthand. And a lot of us in different states, you have some states who are sort of rushing into make sure that they're getting AI in the classroom with this idea that if they don't, they're going to fall behind. There's other places who are taking a much more cautious approach. As you've seen this play out, what have been the concerns about lagging behind in sort of the AI race, if you will, in the classroom?
Yeah, Utah's took an innovative approach. We've always kind of let out on innovation around technology and different items like this. And about a year and a half ago was when I started my role in June 2024 as an AI education specialist. So my day in, day out is AI education. But we've continued having these kind of innovative conversations in the state of Utah to best support what's going on in our districts and our charter schools across the state. And so having an Office of AI Policy that looks at consumer rights protections and stands between the consumer and the companies and creates those things have really helped us to leverage that innovative features of the state around our network and around our schools to really build something unique and support the larger community. The Office of AI Policy has been instrumental in helping me to really sort through some of the big things that are happening in terms of some of the problems that we're seeing with AI. The first thing that they really researched and approached was mental health chatbots, specifically meaning chatbots that are designed for mental health purposes. So there's a big difference between that and somebody using ChatGPT to ask questions about mental health versus a mental health bot that was created with mental health in mind. And so we have first of its kind regulations around that. This year they're looking at deepfakes and provenance, and then also companion chatbots, and developing some legislation around each one of those will be in our next session. And so asking and leveraging those questions as a community has been incredibly helpful, because I'm one expert, and I am lucky to have a sea of experts in the state of Utah that I can leverage and ask them these big questions as they come up with the technology. Because the biggest issue, going back to your core question here,
Yeah.
the biggest issue facing all of us as a national and international community is the speed at which this technology is moving and how we react in real time to that technology and the companies that are creating this technology.
Yeah, I'm seeing some shaking the heads of your fellow panelists. Anybody else want to weigh in on as comments?
Nailed it.
All right, Matt, we're gonna go back to Matt for a moment, but we're gonna want you all to weigh in on this as well. Matt, Utah's been sort of ahead of the curve, right? So we just talked about being more cautious versus kind of rushing in. I'm not saying Utah's rushed in, but they've been ahead of the curve on integrating AI into the classroom. Can you share for us from a lawmaker perspective, what sparked that focus and how did the state go about approaching it?
Yeah. It really comes down to a couple of large scale things that have been long running in the state of Utah. I've been thinking about this for a long time. The first one, comes down to we've had some incredibly forward thinking leadership across the state of Utah. Former Superintendent Sydney Dixon is here in the room. She was a forward thinker for a long term in the state of Utah, and was key in my role being formed. But going back even farther, the creation of our Utah Education Network, which provides internet to every school free of charge in the state of Utah, to the Office of AI Policy, which is a more recent addition. We've always had this standpoint of how do we get ahead of the curve? How do we think through and build systems in place of letting the systems be built for us? And I think that's been really instrumental in how we get ahead. And so on top of that, we collaborate really openly in the state of Utah. As many of you in this room may know, that the federal government released funding to around AI to higher education last week. Monday, the due date for that is just 2 weeks from Wednesday. It's very, very rapid turnaround. And over the last week, we've been able to put together several coalitions to apply for that because we had that collaboration already happening across the state. And so having, again, collaboration in operation along with forward-thinking leadership. But the last one is just open expertise. I pointed to this earlier. We in the state of Utah have many, many experts around AI and governance and those sorts of things that help us to support any of these large-scale questions that come down the pipeline. And so having those collaborating and that leadership and the expertise being in play can get us into a good place.
Matt, I imagine as you're having these conversations, there's teachers, educators, principals, superintendents who are around a table talking about, sure, the risks, but on the opportunities, as they talk about what the opportunities are in the classroom, what is if you were to project out for us in those conversations, what do you expect, or what have those folks expected on how AI is going to reshape education in the next couple of years?
That's a really great question. I think some of us are still kind of sorting through what this technology really means in education and what it really what it will do with our students and with our teachers. And so we have to be really thoughtful about implementation. That's where going back again to collaboration, research, or collaboration and expertise is working with researchers and institutions to really understand what is being done in classrooms. So as part of the process that we were doing in the state of Utah around this training, is the end goal was for teachers who go through a program to write a lesson plan, their content area and grade level, that either uses AI with students or teaches about AI with students, so that we can get a baseline of what teachers are doing out there. A lot of it comes down to making things more personalized. And I know that's a big word for in AI and education, but the truth of the matter is that we're seeing that in real time with some of our teachers. Just a quick aside story, and it's one singular story, but we're seeing this across the state. We had a teacher in a charter school in Provo area who works with severe behavioral students and some students with disabilities. And he decided to make a chat bot that was keyed in. He didn't put any PII into it. He just said, here's the disability, here's the area that they're really struggling with academically, and made one for each one of their students. He had students that are nonverbal. And he came to me after he had implemented this for a couple of weeks, and he said, I can actually hear my students speak now. And it's those beautiful moments of being able to actually access students and give them what they need that I think is really going to push us forward in the next 5 years.
No, I appreciate that. So it's so easy to focus on the negative, and there's a great shining example of something that's positive. Nathan, I'm going to move to you. Matt talked about personalized learning, which I know is something that you've worked on a great deal in ExcelinEd, and ExcelinEd is champion across the country. We have so many artificial intelligence folks, vendors, if you will, entering the education marketplace right now. The states, education thought leaders are sort of focused on, well, what's high quality? How can we vet these to make sure that these are the types of tools that we want inside the classroom? How do you see that playing out in the states?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think at ExcelinEd, we're thinking about it kind of in this is a non exhaustive list, but kind of 6 different areas of policy at this point. Number one, data and privacy. So ensuring that whatever's going to be used in the classroom is certainly compliant with all federal and state student family data privacy standards. And in some cases, there are states that are maybe lacking on the AI side with their student data privacy laws that need to be updated. So take a look at that. Number one. Number two is the accessibility piece. Are they ADA compliant? Do they allow all students, regardless of ability, to access the platform? Number three, security. We talk a lot about wanting platforms to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and SOC 2 is just an industry standard, and the Type 2 component is that the organization or the company has demonstrated over a period of time, not just at one point in time, that they can maintain that standard of security. So that's a very important piece. Number four is the transparency piece. We would like for any AI platform that's going to be procured and used in the classroom to have transparent and auditable records of student interactions with the AI. Number one, and number two, we want the platforms to be able to report out and demonstrate how do they maintain accuracy, how do they determine when errors have been made by the AI, things like that to ensure. I think ultimately we want students to learn. We don't want them to learn the wrong things, even if AI is doing it. Number five, human oversight. We don't want to lose the teacher component in all of this. So the ability for a teacher to override things that might be taking place within the AI platform, or to again have that ability to see what the interactions have been with the students so that they can manage the classroom effectively. And then finally, the training aspect of this. I think all of us at some point in our remarks today have mentioned that teachers have responded that they don't feel that they have had enough training into how to use the platforms properly and for what specific purposes. And so I think as state leaders going out there and ensuring that whatever professional learning requirements there are in place in the state or for individual districts, that the districts in the states consider adding in an AI component for teachers to go ahead and get the right training so that they can use these platforms effectively in the classroom.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's helpful. Matt, there's a lawmaker or state chief here who's thinking, I've got to go back to my state next week and figure out how I'm going to put guardrails on this thing as it's emerging. You've done this. You've been part of this conversation in Utah on putting guardrails around these platforms. Tell us a little bit about the process and what you've all come up with so far.
Yeah, I referenced this earlier. We have Utah Education Network. They're a longstanding provider for our infrastructure around IT in the state. One of the things that we heard very early on in this conversation, I'm talking January of 23, no, January of 24, sorry, I apologize, was from our districts and charter schools. We want safe, cheap, effective AI tools in our classroom that we can manage early. And so through UEN and leveraging existing consortium contracting work, we were able to provide now 4 AI tools in our school districts that are for a lesser price, a consortium price. Those tools have gone through extensive vetting through the University of Utah and UEN around data privacy and security, around SOC 2 compliance, around all the things that you just stated, actually, to make sure that they're leading out. And what's been amazing about that situation is that our districts asked for this, our charter schools asked for it, and we were able to provide it very quickly. So it cut down on the friction of adoption of AI tools. But then also on the flip side, all of these companies are now in the conversation, and we're able to go to them and ask them questions, provide feedback, and really think through a partnership model of how do we work together to provide these tools and the compliance with the issues that we're seeing across the state. And so we were very lucky to jump into this early and really provide those tools, and we are consistently updating those and thinking through, do we need to add more tools or less tools to the situation as well?
As I imagine, as this continues to emerge, you're going to have to update those
Absolutely.
fairly regularly, moving target. I want to switch gears a little bit Robbie was obviously Common Sense Media. I've confessed to Robbie that I use Common Sense every week. As a parent of two boys, 9 and 10, we are constantly using it as a resource tool for us as parents on really how to protect our kids, what content's okay, what can we expect from them to consume. And I want to switch gears a little bit on AI, but really still focus on that, information for parents and students. And we've talked about how to use AI in the classroom. I want to move to the evolution of AI companion bots and the role that we are seeing and you're seeing in Common Sense that play in students' lives and some of the things that our folks here should know about it.
Yeah, thanks for the question, and for the plug for Common Sense Media. We do have a lot of resources out there. I think that one of the things that folks should just be aware of is that, as Casey shared earlier, tech companies have two main business incentives. One is to gain users, and the other is to drive their engagement. And we're seeing with companion chatbots, and again, I'm going to use this broadly, that can be a multi-use chatbot like ChatGPT that's used for companionship, that's used for emotional support or mental health advice, or it can be a standalone chatbot like Character AI. They're one of the well-known ones in the space that's just out there to uh, form relationships or simulate relationships for teens. These are everywhere. Kids are having deeply personal conversations. I shared some of our polling data earlier. A couple other things that I would highlight from that are just 1 in 3 teens say that the conversations that they're having with these chatbots are as satisfying or more satisfying than their conversations with peers or real people. And 1 in 4, 25%, say that they tell chatbots things that they wouldn't tell people in real life. And I think that it's just important to recognize that these platforms use the same emotional dependency and psychological design tricks that were used in the social media era, things like intermittent rewards, personalized responses, and 24/7 availability to drive that engagement. And we've seen just time and time again that engagement maximizing systems are not healthy for teens, and the incentives aren't aligned to user well-being.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Governor Bush shared this morning just a brief story about a teen in Florida who went through that and unfortunately committed suicide. It is playing a significant role in kids' lives. But on the solution front, Common Sense Media has gone through a risk assessment of these companion bots. Talk to us a little bit, Robbie, about what that risk assessment was, what was the process, and what were the findings.
So my team at Common Sense Media does do risk assessments of AI products and platforms that are used by kids, by teens, and in schools. We do major systematic testing of these platforms, and that really starts with research and design to understand where we need to test, where we need to probe. My researchers spend a lot of time on Discord and on Reddit looking at how actual teen users are engaging in conversation with these chatbots, and then we develop testing plans to probe in areas that are related to content, like around a lot of folks have talked about erotic role play or sex or sexual topics as one example of that. But then we've also been working very deeply on understanding how chatbots respond to mental health topics, mental health questions. They're not therapists, even if they say that they are. And we've seen really uneven safety improvements, even in areas where companies have spent a lot of time investing energy and resources, like on suicide prevention. So our bottom line recommendation is that we've given this category of chatbots an unacceptable risk rating. Teens under 18 should not use these chatbots. We recognize that doesn't mean that teens won't use these chatbots, and that sort of gets into the role of educators and parents in helping engage them in conversations. But our research just over and over shows that these companion-like features lead to really dangerous and unhealthy outcomes for teens.
That's helpful. I want to talk about research because we left off with it. Casey, one of the things I love about Jonathan Haidt's work, what Angster Generation is doing, is not just pumping out data to all of us and how to think about the world in front of us as it relates to AI, social media, and other things, but the fact that you're picking apart things like the design features of how that works and how that impacts our kids, how it impacts their mind. Talk a little bit, because now we've talked about education tools, we've talked about companion bots. Talk to us a little bit about the differences in the design features and how those design features may pose an additional risk to our students.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Well, so there's a few layers here. There's what Robbie was just talking about, which are some deliberate choices made by the individual businesses to make their products more anthropomorphic. So when you ask ChatGPT a question and it says it thought for whatever seconds, or sometimes on other products, it'll even have an ellipsis, almost like a friend is texting you back, right? And you can see them in the act of texting about. Those are very deliberate design choices designed to make those products more appealing and more engaging. And so those are very dangerous in their own right, particularly in the hands of kids. But there's a couple of fundamental features of large language model generative AI systems that are, as far as we are aware, immutable. And these things themselves are very dangerous, particularly in the form of companion AI, but also with generalized chatbots. So one of these things is sycophancy, right? So these, raise your hand if you've used ChatGPT or a product like it in the room. All right. Raise your hand, keep your hand up, and keep your hand up if it's told you it's sorry. Right. All right. Some people raise their hands. So like what one thing that happens very frequent with these things is that they kind of kiss your butt a little bit, right? Like, oh, it's like, oh, you had such a great idea, Steve. Like, you're a genius. Like, keep going with that. Yes, you solved this unsolvable math problem that no one had, like Stephen Hawking couldn't solve, right? Like, this is something that's like baked into the way that these systems operate because they're trained and fine-tuned with something called reinforcement learning for human feedback, which is like clicker training for a dog. And so they are optimized to give you what it thinks that you want and to keep you coming back for more. And so if you aren't aware that it's doing that, and particularly if you're a young developing mind, that's like very dangerous. Now, the second attribute that's fundamentally baked into the technology, people think about the hallucinations and the things making mistakes sometimes. Hallucination, I don't like that word because, and number one, it anthropomorphizes the thing in a way that's unhelpful. But two, it actually ontologically doesn't really describe what's going on here. There's a technical philosophical term for what these things are doing. Pardon my language, but that technical philosophical term is bullshit. So there is a philosopher, Harry Frankfurt, who wrote a whole book on this, on bullshit. Bullshitting is different from lying because a liar cares deeply about what the truth is, because a liar is trying to lead you astray from the truth, right? To falsehood. A bullshit artist doesn't care. A bullshit artist has an objective, whether it's to sell you a lemon car or to do any of the other things that a bullshit artist might do. I'm a former tech lobbyist. It takes one to know on, right? Um, and so what these things do is they are optimized for delivering a coherent response, right? Like at the end of the day, that is all these things do. And there's a material difference between a machine designed to do that and, let's say, older versions of, say, Siri or Alexa, right? These things are frustrating because they will say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I don't know. I don't understand. How many times does ChatGPT actually give you that answer, right? Very rarely, because it's just baked into the fundamental architecture of how these things work. And so if you put these in the form of a generalized chatbot or a companion chatbot, this is very dangerous for kids. Like, how many romantic relationships do you have in your life where you always get told what you want to hear, and it's done by someone with an objective to keep you coming back for more, right? Do you really want, like, that's not a healthy relationship, right? Do you want your kids learning that that's how relationships work? No healthy human relationship works that way. That is profoundly messed up. Now, in an educational setting too, pedagogically, that's not real helpful either, right? Like, students need tough love. They need good feedback. And a seems right machine, a machine that's making it up as it goes along, is not going to teach you how the world works. It's not going to deliver knowledge and wisdom at the end of the day. So, that's a fundamental attribute that both the educational setting and these companion bots share that can't really be pulled out of it, and makes them very dangerous.
So you're saying when ChatGPT told me that I was right, that it wasn't sincere?
It's telling when there's an entire South Park episode panning this. I don't know if folks have saw that, but it came out a couple months ago. Yeah.
I make light of it, but the reality is obviously there's some serious concerns going on about how we're retraining and rewiring people's brains as a result of these impulses that they're getting and the feedback loop that they're receiving from these AI. Tell us a little bit, Casey, about what efforts you're seeing at the states and federal level as you crisscross the nation to work on this, and then I'll go to Nathan and talk specifically about Florida.
Well, states are leading the way here, which is great, in part because Congress has trouble getting anything done. But also, 10th Amendment, states are laboratories of democracy. So there's probably more types of bills out there than we could list here today, but my favorites include things that don't try to invent new regulatory regimes, but build on existing concepts and idea in law. Because fundamentally, what has happened over the last generation is a class of technology companies have succeeded in getting themselves treated as separate and apart from other business interests, right? They're special, whether it's Section 230, other things. And so the best thing that states can do is actually start to treat these businesses like every other business that is out there. And so there's two things in particular I want to highlight that I think show great promise. One is products liability for AI systems. So establishing that these are not services, they are products, which means that they can be defectively designed and manufactured. And just like every other product manufacturer out there, if I make tainted baby food or dog food or a defective car and it hurts someone, I can be held accountable for that. Now, there's some complexities there that need to be carefully thought through, but it's definitely a workable regime. And most product liability law is state law because it's derived from contract law and tort law. So there's a really significant role for states to play there. The other is design standards. And this gets, I think, to some of what Robbie was talking about, particularly these anthropomorphic features, they do not need to be targeted towards kids. And so rather than defining a category of product, let's say we don't want companion AIs being offered to minors. Sure, a state can try that, but that's not super helpful because people are just going to go use ChatGPT for the same thing, or a new tech company will find a workaround. But it's better to regulate the design elements that actually make the thing harmful. And there's a couple of states that we hope to see a model bill introduced that we've been working on at the Anxious Generation team, along with the Young People's Alliance and a few other groups that would restrict the availability of human-like design features being targeted at minors. Yeah. And federally, there's also a products liability bill that Senator Hawley and Durbin introduced back in September, shortly after Robbie testified in Congress. That's modeled on some of the same principles that I mentioned about products liability.
Yeah. Robbie getting Congress to act, it's a miracle. Good job.
Yeah, that's all me.
Casey said something that's near and dear to my heart, which is states are leading the way, which I think is, we all know is inherently true. And certainly the leaders in this room are able and capable to do that. Talk a little bit, Nathan, about Florida, what's going on there and what you expect to see in the future.
Yes. So states are leading the way, and typically Florida leads the way in a lot on most things, with the exception of maybe Utah and some of the social media and cell phone stuff where we've kind of been working in tandem. But just to kind of go through the history a little bit, Florida was first long before even, and Jonathan Haidt put out his book. Last year we passed a cell phone free policy in 2023. We followed that up with social media regulations, generally modeled after Utah, but we saw a little bit of where they may have constitutionally stumbled early on, and we tried to go after. I think that I shouldn't say we. The legislature tried to go after the design features of social media to try and I guess have a stronger constitutional argument, and so we got that passed in 2024. And then I think heading into 2026, I know Governor talked about it today, the speaker just mentioned it, but there is the family in Orange County, the Garcia family, that did lose a 14-year-old child after that child had a 10-month-long relationship with a chat bot on character.it, at a company that allows you to have conversations with your favorite TV show character. And we think that that's a big problem. A lot of legislators in Florida think that that's a big problem too. You just made a really good point, because I was thinking about my approach was going to be, we're just going to ban it for those under the age of 18. But I think listening to you now, I think I probably need to go back and have some additional conversations about, let's go after the design features so we can be more effective, similarly in the way that we did with social media. And so I'm really bullish, I know you are too, on what Florida will do this next year, hopefully. And hopefully, maybe all of, many states in here will beat Florida to this. If you've got an earlier session, or you've got, or if this has inspired you and you go outside this room and want to file a bill, there's certainly a bunch of individuals up here who are willing to help.
Could I
Yeah,
just
please.
build on that?
Yeah.
Like the tide is kind of turning. The sense of states regulating technology. Both. I mean, at the success of the phone-free school movement. Hopefully, some of y'all were just next door. Shows that we can actually do something. And the sense, like I've been working in tech policy for about a decade now. The sense is always like, let's do the bare minimum. We're afraid of doing too much. But now there's starting to be states who are thinking like, let's build a good environment for kids to grow up in offline and do the most that we can to make that happen. And I've had good conversations with Governor Cox in Utah about this, and I expect for that to start to become the reality next year, again, with states leading the way, but actually in a race to the top about let's do this the best and create the best environment for kids to grow up safely online and offline.
And partly, I just add one piece, and partly I think that's a little bit of guilt from how we didn't do this on the front end in social media. And so I think, 10 years, 12 years of not getting this right or just kind of sitting on our hands. Now we have the opportunity at the front end of AI, I think, to get it right. And for, I think, many adults who might have missed the bus inadvertently on social media, now's the time and now's the opportunity to, we get a redo, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that sentiment, Nathan. I just want to highlight it briefly, which is we get this sort of redo, right, where we were behind before. And as my dad would say, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, like you can't put it back in. And so I do think this is exactly the time we need to be having this conversation so that, everyone in the room is armed to go back and do what you need to do on behalf of kids. Matt, we've talked a lot about how students are using or could use AI positively and negatively. What about teachers, right? I mean, how do we prepare teachers to use AI, to use it responsibly and well for their students, but also to guide their students on how to use it responsibly?
One thing that there's a wonderful researcher at the University of Utah, and he and I talked a little bit about this, and he he said one of my favorite things about AI generally. We have to remember that generative AI is one animal in the zoo of AI. And it's just like what you just said about companion chatbots. It's one type in the larger system. And so we have to work with our when we think about generative AI has been in our systems for much longer than 2022, before ChatGPT. And so we have to think about AI as a much longer term project and a much longer term system in our society. And with that also in mind, when generative AI hit in November of 2022, all of a sudden it hit everyone equally all at once. And that's something that we have to account for when we think about our teachers. It didn't just hit our students. It didn't just hit our teachers. It didn't hit just our leaders. It hit everyone, including our parents, industry, all at once. And we're all trying to solve this all at once. And so when I think about training and kind of this basic AI literacy component, it's not just our teachers. And there's lots of great things that we've been doing to support them. And I'll talk about that in a second. But we have to think about how do we support our leaders in our buildings as well, because if we forget them, then systemic change doesn't happen. If we don't think about our district leaders, then we can't ratify these things in our districts and charter schools so that things actually stay and change mitigation happens over time. And if we don't think about our parents, then we're missing out on one of the largest components of the AI puzzle, because they're getting fed, just like the rest of us, dis and malinformation through social media every day around artificial intelligence and what kind of things that they should be thinking that may be problematic in the long run. So when we think about training, we have to think about it from a lot of different evaluatory standpoints and to provide that. When we're thinking specifically about teachers, we really have to start with basic AI literacy. What is it? How does it work? What are the safeguards here? A lot of what I've done in the last year and a half with our teams at USBE has been around data privacy and thinking really deeply about what does it mean when you plug a response into a chatbot? What does that look like from a large language model standpoint? Does it absorb? Does it not? Are you in a walled garden? Are you not? And how do we really think those things through? And honestly, I've had some very scary conversations with full schools where they've gone, oh, I use ChatGPT all the time. Are you logged in? Are you paying for it? Is it training on your data? Oh, if it's training on your data, what are you learning, or what is it learning from you about your school? And that's something that a lot of people have to reckon with, again, not just inside our classrooms and our school buildings, but in our school communities as well. Yeah. And so on the second layer that we're looking at is really thinking about how do we influence our parents next? And how do we work with them to think through what they need to know about this technology and how can they use this appropriately in their lives, but then also how can they help their students to provide AI literacy? Because when we think about something like a companion chatbot, parents need to be aware of what that is and what's the difference between that and other technologies that are out there in the space.
Matt, how do we measure this, right? I mean, every time we've been sort of introduced technology over the years into the classroom, we've got really excited and pumped. And then did we measure it appropriately? I'll give you a silly example. I remember when laptops came into the classroom, Dean Good, and we were supposed to do test taking and as a student, and I realized, I could type faster, I spelled better, my grammar was correct, but I didn't think as well. Right. So I went back to the blue book model and was a better test taker. So as we introduce these far more complex tools, how are we measuring the impact that it's having on students?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think one of the $1 million questions around AI in education right now. There's a couple different layers to that that we're working on in the state of Utah with other states, but then also other research organizations. One is finding bright spots of use, maybe kind of layered throughout the school system, maybe K through 12, or maybe through CTE programs or those sorts of things. But then also encouraging the development of bright spots. So looking and working with full school systems or full, from leadership down to the classroom, how to imply this in the classroom and appropriately. So that's one, and the other one is there's two layers to it. One is working with higher education because they have the research capacity often to really dig into these problems and they're trained to work on it. I'm not a researcher by background. I'm actually an English language arts teacher by background, folks. And so just throwing that out there. And so when we think about having researchers come in, I always want to work with our higher ed partners. But then a lot of the companies who are moving into the ed tech space around AI, they would really like to provide validity for their tools as well and do this. A lot of them are former teachers that would like to do this the safest ways possible. So working with them to look at how their tools are being used, what are some of the best cases that we're seeing, and then pairing them with research organizations so that they can move the work forward, get it documented, and moving quickly through that process. That's something that I'm really diving into at Utah State Board of Education, is moving this a little bit faster so we can get validity and or whatever layer of validity that we get faster.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Matt. Casey, Robbie, how does guidance and policies and states work together to make sure that we're coming up with the right cocktail, if you will, of protections, but also not closing all the opportunities for kids inside the classroom?
Well, I think, the policies that I mentioned first, one thing that they're doing kind of indirectly is creating a market for the sorts of or technologies that Matt's talking about that could actually be useful. Because most of the stuff that's ending up in classrooms today, whether a student is using it as at home to help him or her with their homework, or whether it's in the classroom itself, they aren't really existing in a market that is, I would say, uh, allowing for companies that are building things that are intended to deliver educational results can thrive, right? Like, and what is otherwise happening is companies are taking a product, a technology that they already have, and trying to shoehorn it into an educational setting. And so think about, by analogy, to cars, right? Before Ralph Nader, before Unsafe at Any Speed, there was not really any sort of incentive for car manufacturers to compete on safety. But then once you have seatbelt laws and once you actually have crash tests and things like that, you have brands start to want to differentiate themselves on safety because there's a market opportunity, right? So that's what creates, the reputation that Subaru or Volvo, or like pick your sort of car brand that's like associated with safety. That doesn't exist yet. And so by creating a framework of product liability laws and creating design standards, we can start to create that market. And then once that market exists, I think there'll be a lot more clarity over sort of policies and practices that schools can use that are downstream of that.
Yeah, to build on Casey's point, I think and to give a concrete example, right now, if you use the Gemini K-12 chatbot with your students, if it's turned on through Google Workspace for Education, it can do a great job giving your students math advice, but they can also get dating advice from it and ask it a wide range of other questions that are non-academic in nature. Imagine anything a teenager would put into a chatbot, and they can do it. And there are guardrails, and I'm not picking on Google. I'm just mentioning them because they're widely deployed in K-12. That's like an example of maybe the shoehorning that Casey was just describing. And there has to be innovation at the company level to say, look, these things need to be a good fit developmentally and educationally, and that means limiting certain types of functionality. The math tutoring, the ELA tutoring, great, that's fine, right? Those are less risky use cases, but when you bundle them into a product that will talk to you about virtually all kinds of other things, that starts to get like to be a really challenging value proposition for schools thinking about deploying this with kids. And then two, it shouldn't have the responsibility fall on parents to have to go into an app store and determine whether or not a chatbot is going to potentially coach their kid into committing suicide. And that really calls for state level regulation. And I think there's a lot of pieces of that, a lot of ingredients where we've seen a lot of progress. Age assurance is absolutely one of those, to be able to identify who young people are on platforms and to be able to serve them more appropriate, more guardrailed versions of that. Obviously, kids will get around that, but there's other pieces like that that are going to be critical to just limit access to models that are designed for adults for young people. Go ahead, man.
Can I think you said something really important there that I just want to highlight. When we talk about training, we need to work with our teachers to find the features that really provide these guardrails as well. So something like teaching them how to create a constitution for a chatbot that can be deployed at the classroom level that provides some of these guardrails is invaluable. But on the flip side, I love what you've been saying about features and like these parts of a product. We can legislate out or like litigate out features that we don't want, but we also can litigate and legislate features we do want into these tools. And I think that two-way street is very, very important here to point out, is that there are features of these AI bots that are really, really valuable that can be used to great effect, but they have to be employed in every model or in every tool. And that's a very important part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. Casey, for the lawmakers in the room, folks who want to go back to their states, implement protections, what are some of the headwinds and challenges that they can expect as they work to implement these protections?
Well, one is the federal government, actually. So just this morning,
Shocker.
well, and in fact, like just a headwind against states leading the way. Just this morning, it was covered that Majority Leader Scalise intends to reintroduce the idea of a moratorium on state AI laws. So, if you are an elected, definitely get in touch with your federal delegation and tell them you don't want this, right? Because until the federal government can set an acceptable floor on safety, certainly. Second, is actually not getting things ticked and tied with the First Amendment in particular, right? Like many of you state lawmakers, you don't have staff. You are part-time. You're citizen legislators. You're taking an exam on a multitude of subjects every single day that you are in session, whether it's the environment or education or all these sorts of things. And so it's really hard to get these things crafted correctly. But the tech companies are very well practiced at getting these things held up in court with, I would say, spurious constitutional arguments that by themselves are actually very dangerous, the arguments, and could lead to problematic precedent. So, for example, in Sewell Setzer's case in Florida, Google and Character AI are arguing in court that Sewell had a First Amendment right to receive information from the chatbot. And thus, the company should not and cannot be held accountable under the Constitution for its product encouraging the boy to commit suicide. That is absolutely unacceptable. Furthermore, another thing that the companies are arguing in court, and thankfully no court has yet bought this argument, is that all code is speech and is thus protected by the First Amendment. Now, if they were to win this argument in court, it would not only make regulating social media impossible or regulating these companion AI bots impossible, but it would actually pull the rug out from under all of the existing privacy regulation that we have in this country. And so it is paramount that these arguments cannot win in court. And the way to do that is to have very well crafted, very well thought through legislation. And I think Robbie and I can both point you in the direction of some experts who can help you with that. So get things ticked and tied, consult people who know what they're doing with the First Amendment arguments, and stay as far away from content and speech as you can, and focus more on design and things like product liability.
That's great. And this is going to be our last question, and then we're going to get to audience participation and questions. This is sort of the money shot, which is, these folks are going to go back to their home states. So whether they're at the state, the local, the district level, we've talked about the opportunities of AI. We've talked about the risks. What would you view as the next steps? What would be your sort of last parting shot for folks to go home and to work on when they get home? And Nate, we'll start with you.
We'll definitely tackle all of the risks that are associated that we've talked about here today. We've spent a lot of time talking about them, so I won't belabor them. But I think also understand where there are specific opportunities for AI to positively impact the classroom and really district operations, which Governor Bush talked a little bit about today. There are companies out there that, if you think about school bus routes, and the fact that we essentially school bus routes are built on the basis of who may at some point in time over the school year ride a bus, even though those students or that particular person may never ride the bus. And so you have these really inefficient bus routes and kids waiting out, and in the northern states in the cold or in the dark, and at places that are maybe not the safest for them to be waiting for buses, and it's just a really inefficient process. But there are companies out there underpinned by AI software that can build live, you know, new bus transportation routes that are dynamic and can change based on student patterns, student use patterns, and things like that. That's one use case I think that could save a lot of money for taxpayers and for school districts, and also just create a more efficient situation. Number two, I think there are platforms out there that utilize and operate within that walled garden. Khan Academy's Khanmigo, Amira Learning, other platforms out there that are specifically designed to support student learning. And in Florida, we've deployed those platforms, and there's literally hundreds of thousands of students who have reading deficiencies and math deficiencies who are in a pedagogically appropriate way getting personalized tutoring through these platforms, which really just extends the capacity of the teacher, and better supports students. So yes, tackle all of the risks that are here. That's number one. But number two, don't forget about some of these specific opportunities that are available. Robbie.
I would just urge folks to meet their stakeholders where they are. I'm thinking back to a training that I did last Friday with 80 district level superintendents in California, and I was getting some of them logged into Character AI for the first time so that they could experience talking to a companion chatbot the first time. And there was one system leader who opened up Character, and she was like, "What do I do with this? Like, how do I get started? Like, what am I even looking at?" So I think that if you haven't tried a companion chatbot, don't want you don't want to get you hooked, but definitely encourage you to open one up, try it out, see how young people are talking to these things, and then have that experience with other people in your buildings and in your systems, because we can't talk about how to keep kids safe if we don't understand how kids are actually using products.
Yeah, Robbie's absolutely right. So, phones and social media are a bipartisan issue that is impacting every single family in this country, right? Every single family is dealing with this around their kitchen table every day. And so, if you aren't a parent or a grandparent yourself and you aren't conversant in these things, particularly with the more emerging technologies, like get smart on it now, not only to help them and to serve your constituents and your stakeholders, but there's like electoral gold laying in the streets, like waiting to be picked up, because the phone free school session last thing shows that results get delivered super quick, right? Like these are some of the cheapest policies that you can enact that can make an overnight material difference in people's lives. And so that's a huge opportunity for people to go home and work on. So that's, I think, I just want to underscore Robbie's point as my point one. But point two is that there is no silver bullet policy, because this is a huge issue, right? It isn't just the issue of chatbots. It isn't just the issue of efficaciously using AI in the classroom, but all of these things are connected and related to social media age minimums, the responsibilities of app stores, the design standards on social media, what age kids get smartphones at, right? Like this is a big issue. So don't get with your colleagues and don't try to tackle just one of it and hope that it's going to solve it, but actually think about the problem more holistically and the suite of policies that you need to do in order to create that race to the top that I mentioned earlier. We have resources on that at the Anxious Generation. I'm happy to point y'all in that direction.
I appreciate all the comments, and I think we've hit on this, and I just want to bring it to the forefront towards the end of this, is the speed at which this is hitting our society is immeasurable. Every day, I'm sure all four of us can agree to this, every day there just is 10 updates that we have to think through, and they may change fundamentally how we think about these things, and they may shift how we think about policy. And so one of the things, because there's so much coming at us every single day around artificial intelligence, one thing that I've had to deeply, deeply leverage in my state is that acknowledge is that I can't do all the work myself. And so as you go back to your states, as you start working on this, make sure you're leveraging your higher ed communities, your governance communities, your districts, your charter schools, and working with them, because if we can spread the work, we're going to be able to move a little bit more accurately and a little bit more quickly, because as you pointed out, we're up against companies who have large scale teams and lots of money, who are moving and building this technology much more quickly than we can adopt and adapt to it. And so we have to really think through, how can we bring together coalitions in our individual states to address these needs at scale and at speed. And I think that's something that we've driven towards in the state of Utah, and we really want to keep building on, is helping to build these coalitions to address all these issues.
Yeah. Thank you for that advice on thoughtful next steps. We've got about 5 minutes for questions. If you'd like to step to the microphone, you're welcome to. My only ask is that since we might probably have a few, if we could just keep it succinct, and maybe we'll have one of our panelists volunteer to answer, and that way we can get a few questions done. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lynn Nealon. Thank you for this incredible panel. I'm with a new organization called the Institute for Families and Technology, and we promote policies that enhance connection uninhibited by screens. But more importantly, I'm a mom of 4 in the Durham public school systems. And I have a plea and a question. My plea is to please, the way to keep up with AI and protect our kids in the digital age is to slow down. And I do not think that our children should be guinea pigs for big tech, and nor should our students and schools be profit centers for big tech. And I have to say, it terrifies me when I'm hearing that we need to, at speed, introduce these systems and then measure what's happening. Again, I don't want my kids to be guinea pigs. And what I did not hear in the panel is the only research that I know of that is showing that AI is effective in educational outcomes is from the companies themselves. I didn't hear in the 6 policies that we would have proof before introducing AI to children that it actually does work. What I do know is the research about the harms. There are several families who have brought lawsuits against ChatGPT, and I cannot get an answer from our school principal about why they're using it. And it goes against everything we know about how children learn. So what is the research showing that AI is so beneficial to our kids that we need to follow big tech's push in getting it into all of the schools?
Anybody want to take that? Any volunteers? Everyone's like, no, I don't want to take it.
Point made.
Well, it's a question about burden of proof, right? Like, what you're actually highlighting is, on whom should the burden of proof be to show that this is good and it works, or it doesn't work, right? I would argue, and it sounds like you would agree, that the burden of proof should be on the companies trying to push this into classrooms. Unfortunately, because of the control that they have over the information environment and their advertising budget and their ability to sort of use this a breathless moment of the last 2 years, that question has been bypassed. And we're very likely to end up in the same situation we were in with kids in social media and phones in schools, where you have this small chorus saying, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence to change it? When it's like, there was no evidence to start from that it was good. So it's a smart question. I think it's always important for folks to ask, where is it appropriate for that burden of proof to lay? And it should lay on those companies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Representative Margaret Drive from New Hampshire. Utah, thank you so much. We're modeling a lot of stuff on you, but some of the things are going to being litigated, and that drives a fear into some of my fellow representatives. So bills that I thought would be obvious and very well supported were not. And so is interim study or the threat of a bill going to drive any changes in technology? I'd love to be able to say, yes, we passed everything with no problem, but we're not going to do that. And so I want to know, is it still worth the effort to keep the threat of that there?
That's a great question. Just thinking through like how we've approached some of the AI stuff in the state of Utah around specifically education and the legislature, having this extra body that's Office of AI Policy that's kind of mitigating and negotiating between the legislature, the companies, and helping to build these model legislations, it gives it a much longer tail for the development process. So when they develop the process or the legislation around mental health chatbots, that was a year-long process that went through interim and those sorts of things. So when we think about how to build the legislation around AI, having a group that's really looking at that and examining it from multifaceted standpoints and a research-based standpoint can be incredibly helpful. And so that's one way that we've kind of moved that forward, and that way we have consensus going into legislative session around it, because there's been so much conversation happening around it before previously.
Okay, so am I hearing say keep going?
I would say keep going, but I would advocate for, again, from my standpoint at the State Board of Education, being able to work with this extra body that is in commerce and does this regulatory sandboxing around artificial intelligence. Having that group in your state may be really helpful. And if anybody's interested, ai.utah.gov has model legislation around how to build that group, and I'd be more than happy to talk that through as well.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Yes, sir. We got time for maybe one quick question.
Hi, Rob Ellaville, Transparency Coalition. This is for Nathan. You ticked off at the beginning basically 6 priorities from ExcelinEd in terms of basically procurement requirements, I think, for educational software. And I think for the people interested in policy in this room, it would be helpful. Casey mentioned trying to create an environment where the products deployed to our students are actually designed for those things. And but you do have, I believe, ExcelinEd has a model bill, and it would help maybe to go one click down on at least what SOC 2 means, because I think for a lot of people in this room, they don't know that that's a pretty high standard, and it would really improve your model bill, and some of the requirements in there would really limit it would make companies focus on just education as a market, like Casey mentioned.
Thanks, Rob. Good to see you. Yeah, so SOC 2, it is a very, very high standard. It's a data security standard. I'm not an expert in it, so I can't give you all of the technical pieces. If someone up here is, they certainly can help me out here. But there's 2 types. There's the type A or the type 1, and then there's the type 2. The type 1 is, can you demonstrate it at some, can you demonstrate it today that you meet these requirements, and then maybe tomorrow you can no longer demonstrate it. Well, you still get the type 1 SOC 2 designation. The type 2 is the piece that we're interested in, and it's what we've put into Florida law around how we want our AI tutoring software to be used. They have to be SOC 2 type 2 compliant, so that we know that those their ability to demonstrate that high security standard has carried through 6 to 12 months over time. And so you're right, our model legislation has that. There's a lot of technical pieces we're still trying to work through, because I think to the broader point of the panel, which is that we don't want to put something out there that the tech companies can just easily manipulate and get around. And so, or the AI companies can easily manipulate and get around because they're smarter than us at how to use their own technology. And so, we're still working through that, and we'll continue to do that with everybody up here. Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you walked away with some great next steps on how to go back to your home states and districts and protect our kids. Will you all join me in thanking our great panel from today?